Emma Patel had spent the entire weekend preparing for the Monday morning presentation. Her laptop was littered with drafts, color-coded spreadsheets, and notes written in her tiny, neat handwriting. She wasn't nervous about the data. She knew her work was solid, but she was nervous about presenting it in front of her boss. Richard Clark was one of those men who smiled only when someone else looked small. He'd been with the company for over 15 years, carried himself like a monarch in his department, and enjoyed reminding everyone how junior analysts should learn their place. Emma took her seat in the glass-walled conference room 15 minutes early. The others trickled in, chatting about weekend plans and office gossip. Her palms were slightly damp, her heart steady but heavy. When Clark entered, conversation halted. He clapped his hands once. "All right, let's keep this short. Emma's got something she wants to show us about the Seabrook account." She stood, smoothed her blazer, and began, "Thank you, Mr. Clark. Over the past quarter, we've seen an unexpected pattern in Seabrook's supply chain metrics." "Unexpected?" Clark cut in, leaning back in his chair. "Or maybe you just read the data wrong." A few chuckles fluttered around the table. Emma's throat tightened, but she kept her tone steady. "No, sir. I verified the numbers 3 times. If you look at slide 4, you'll see," Clark waved a hand. "Slide 4, slide 5. Emma, this report's all over the place. What exactly are you trying to prove here?" She clicked to the next slide. "That the supplier inconsistencies are costing us nearly 3% in operational losses." And Clark's voice sliced through hers again. "That's basic stuff. Everyone here knows how to track supplier performance. I asked you for insight, not a high school math project." The words hit harder than she expected. The other analysts looked down at their notepads. No one spoke. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Emma wanted to defend herself, to explain that her data wasn't basic, that it revealed a deeper inefficiency Clark himself had missed in his last audit. But her throat closed up. She stared at her slides, then at her boss, and forced a small nod. "I'll refine it," she said softly. Clark smirked. "Good, maybe next time you'll bring something worth the board's time." He turned to the rest of the team. "All right, let's move on to someone who's actually ready. Mark, what have you got for us?" The meeting continued as if nothing had happened. Emma sat down, her ears ringing. Her own voice echoed in her mind, "I'll refine it. I'll refine it." The phrase tasted like defeat. When the meeting ended, she gathered her papers slowly, hoping everyone would leave before she did. But as she slipped her laptop into her bag, she caught snippets of whispered conversation. "She works too hard for someone who lets him walk all over her," someone murmured. "Yeah, but Clark's always like that. Better her than us." Emma pretended not to hear. She smiled faintly at the receptionist on her way out and stepped into the hallway. The glass door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded almost like applause. But the wrong kind. She found an empty bench by the window overlooking the city. Outside, the morning sun glinted off mirrored skyscrapers. Indifferent to her small humiliation, for a moment she let herself feel it, the anger, the sting, the shame. Then she breathed out slowly, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to herself, "Stay quiet. Just work harder. That's how you survive here." But deep down, a flicker of something else stirred an ember of quiet defiance. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, the one where she said nothing, would be the one everyone remembered. When she finally rose above them all, the week after the meeting felt like walking through fog. Emma came to work early and stayed late, quietly patching up reports, answering emails that weren't hers, and fixing data that Mr. Clark had accidentally misfiled. She didn't complain. Complaining was for people who could afford to, but something inside her had shifted. Each time she heard Clark's booming voice from across the office, that ember of humiliation from the meeting glowed hotter. On Wednesday morning, she found her own slide deck, her Seabrook analysis, attached to an internal memo Clark had just sent to upper management. Her name was gone from the document. In its place, the footer read, "Prepared by Richard Clark, department head." For a moment, she just stared at it. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but disbelief. He hadn't even bothered to change the formatting. Her graphs, her colors, her analysis, every line of it screamed her style. That afternoon, she confronted him tried to. She waited outside his office as he finished a call. His door was open and she heard him laughing. Yeah, my team's shaping up, though some of them still need to learn how real business works. I had to clean up a junior's mess this week, big client account. Could have been bad, but you know me. Always saving the day. He leaned back in his leather chair, grinning. Emma turned away before he saw her. That night she stayed in the office long after everyone left. The building was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the low buzz of the city outside. She opened the Seabrook file again, going over every cell. Every figure. That's when she saw it, an inconsistency in Clark's revisions. The numbers he'd cleaned up didn't match the original supplier data. It wasn't a typo. It was deliberate. He'd inflated the performance metrics to make it look like the department was outperforming last quarter. Her stomach twisted. If the board discovered the manipulation, the company could face a serious audit or worse, a breach of client trust. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the glowing screen. She could fix it quietly, like always. Or she could say something, but she could still hear his voice from that meeting. This is why juniors shouldn't touch big accounts. Emma closed her eyes. No, not this time. The next day. She began gathering proof. Not to expose him yet, but to understand just how deep the problem went. She dug through emails, backup folders, and old quarterly reports. What she found shocked her. Clark had been adjusting figures for months, sometimes to meet targets, sometimes to cover up bad decisions. Each discovery added a new layer to her anger, but also her resolve. By Friday, she'd filled a folder with evidence, screenshots, audit trails, metadata, everything meticulously organized. She named the folder simply Truth. That evening, she met with Ms. Rivera, a senior executive visiting from headquarters. Rivera had noticed Emma's quiet diligence over the years, her accuracy, her calmness. Over coffee, Rivera asked casually, "You've been with Clark's team for what, 4 years now?" 5, Emma said softly. "And how's he as a manager?" Emma hesitated. Her instinct was to deflect, to protect her job. But she met Rivera's eyes and said carefully, "Efficient in presentation. Less so in practice?" Rivera raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She smiled faintly. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Keep doing what you're doing, Miss Patel. People notice." For the first time in a long while, Emma felt seen. That night, as she walked home through the cool autumn air, the city lights reflected in her eyes, not as something distant, but as something possible. She wasn't ready to act yet, but she was done staying small. Her silence had protected her once. Now it was her weapon. The following week began like any other. Coffee too early, meetings too long, praise given to all the wrong people. But Emma wasn't the same woman who had sat quietly in that glass-walled room 2 weeks ago. She had something Clark didn't know about: truth. Hard and undeniable, sitting like a secret flame on her USB drive. Every time she looked at him swaggering down the hallway, her mind whispered, "You don't even realize you're walking on ice." Still, she didn't rush. Recklessness wasn't her way. Instead, she watched. She observed how Clark charmed the executives with confident half-truths, how he made juniors compete for his approval, how he weaponized praise and silence alike. It was almost artful, the way he manipulated perception, but behind the smirk and perfect suit, his control was cracking. Emma could see it in the little things, the late-night emails he sent full of typos, the tension in his voice when he talked about the upcoming quarterly audit. One afternoon, she overheard him on the phone through his half-open door. "Listen, I told you to delay those invoices. I don't care what compliance says, just make the numbers match. We'll clean it up after the audit." Emma froze. That was it. Proof he wasn't just bending the truth, he was breaking it. She returned to her desk, heart pounding but steady. Her hands moved automatically, documenting everything: timestamps, email headers, recorded inconsistencies. She wasn't collecting revenge anymore. She was protecting the company, protecting her team, protecting herself. That night, she sat in her apartment, laptop open, city lights flickering outside like restless stars. The folder marked Truth glowed on her desktop. She hovered the cursor over it for a long time. She could send it right now. One email to Ms. Rivera and everything would unravel. Clark's arrogance, his manipulation, the years of credit he'd stolen, they'd all come crashing down, but fear whispered in her ear. What if they don't believe you? What if they blame you instead? She closed her laptop and pressed her palms over her face. For years, she had worked in silence, blending into the background, surviving by staying unseen. Speaking up could destroy everything she'd built. The next morning, she dragged herself to work, exhausted but resolute. She'd decided to wait until the audit until she could expose Clark, not just with data, but in front of everyone he'd fooled. Until then, she'd play her part perfectly. She greeted him with a polite smile. "Morning, Mr. Clark." He barely looked up. "Morning, Emma. That report from last week, send me your draft again. I'll fine-tune it before sending it to Rivera." Her lips curved slightly. "Of course." When he wasn't looking, she saved both versions, hers and his. Every edit he made, every number he tampered with, every fine-tune became another nail in his own coffin. 2 days later, Rivera emailed her directly. "Emma, I'll be reviewing departmental reports with the board next Monday. I'd like you to attend alongside Mr. Clark. Consider it a learning opportunity." Emma stared at the screen, pulse quickening. It wasn't just a meeting, it was the stage. Clark, of course, was thrilled. "Perfect," he told her. "You'll handle the technical questions? I'll do the talking. Just remember who's running the show." She nodded. "I remember." That night, Emma opened the Truth folder one last time. She reorganized everything, formatted her findings, and added one final document, a summary titled Integrity Review, Seabrook Account Discrepancies. She printed a single copy and slipped it into her briefcase. As she turned off her desk lamp, her reflection in the dark window stared back at her, not the timid analyst who once trembled under Clark's mockery, but a woman standing on the edge of something irreversible. Her silence had built this moment. Now it would end it. Monday arrived with a sharp chill in the air, the kind that made even the city seem to hold its breath. Emma arrived early, dressed in a charcoal gray suit she'd bought years ago for an interview she never got. The fabric still smelled faintly of dry cleaning and nerves. In her briefcase lay the printed report she'd titled Integrity Review. She'd stayed up until dawn refining it, cross-verifying data, double-checking every timestamp, formatting it so cleanly even Clark couldn't dismiss it as junior work. By the time she entered the 10th floor boardroom, the table was already filling. Mr. Clark stood at the head of the room, laughing easily with two senior executives. His confidence radiated like a spotlight, bright, blinding, almost convincing. "Emma," he said when he saw her. "There you are. I'll lead the presentation. You handle the numbers if they ask. Keep it simple, yeah?" "Of course," she said, her voice calm. Inside, her heartbeat was a quiet drum. Ms. Rivera entered last, her presence commanding and composed. She gave Emma a brief nod, acknowledgement, not warmth, but it steadied her nonetheless. The meeting began. Clark clicked through his slides, speaking with the rehearsed charm of someone who'd been doing this for years. "As you can see, our Seabrook account continues to deliver exceptional performance metrics," he said, gesturing toward the upward graphs that Emma had built and that he had altered. "Operational efficiency is up, client retention solid, and projections for next quarter are even stronger." Rivera frowned slightly. "Mr. Clark, these numbers look higher than the raw data I reviewed last month. Did something change?" Clark chuckled smoothly. Yes. We ran a few optimizations, updated our inputs. Nothing major. My team's been refining the process, especially Emma here." All eyes turned to her. She felt the heat of the moment press against her chest, but her expression didn't waver. Rivera tilted her head. "Ms. Patel, could you walk us through the specifics of these updates?" Clark started to interject. "No need, I can," but Rivera lifted a hand. "I asked Miss Patel." Emma inhaled slowly. This was it. The moment that had been building for weeks, no, for years, she stood, walked to the screen, and connected her laptop. "Actually," she said, voice clear and steady, "I brought my own copy of the report. It includes the original datasets and system logs." Clark blinked. "Emma, what are you doing?" She didn't look at him. "Clarifying." The projector flickered as her version appeared clean, honest, unaltered. She clicked between the two versions, Clark's falsified data and the real figures. The differences were undeniable. "These are the performance metrics as originally submitted," she said evenly. "And these," she highlighted the inflated figures, "are what were later entered into the system by Mr. Clark's account?" A ripple of shock moved across the room. Rivera leaned forward. "You're saying these changes were unauthorized?" Emma met her gaze. "Yes, ma'am. I verified the edit logs myself. They point directly to Mr. Clark's credentials. The alterations made the department appear more profitable than it is, especially on the Seabrook contract." Clark's face flushed red. "This is absurd. She must have made a mistake. Patel, you're out of line." But Rivera's eyes stayed on Emma. "Do you have proof?" Emma reached into her briefcase and slid the printed report across the table. "All timestamps, email records, and audit trails are documented here, including the files he sent to finance last Friday." Silence. Heavy, unforgiving, Clark sputtered, This is a misunderstanding. She's trying to sabotage me." Rivera didn't even look at him. "Enough." She skimmed a few pages, then said quietly, "Mr. Clark, step outside, now." He hesitated, but one look from her made him obey. The door closed behind him with a dull thud. Rivera exhaled, eyes softening as she looked at Emma. "You handled that with remarkable restraint. Most people would have gone straight to HR or straight to war." Emma swallowed hard. "I didn't want to humiliate anyone. I just wanted the truth to be seen," Rivera nodded. "It was. And so were you." For the first time in a long while, Emma let herself breathe. The silence that had once bound her now filled the room, but this time it belonged to her. The silence in the boardroom lingered even after Clark left. It wasn't the uneasy kind that followed chaos, it was the kind that filled a room when truth finally arrived, and everyone was still catching up to it. Emma sat quietly, her hands folded on the table, heart still thudding in her chest. Rivera was on the phone with compliance, her voice calm but sharp. "Yes, begin the internal audit immediately." "No, do not alert Mr. Clark until I say so." When she hung up, she turned to Emma. "You'll need to submit your findings to our legal department," Rivera said. "This will go higher than my level." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have a backup of everything you showed us?" Emma nodded, lifting her briefcase. "Two, actually." Rivera allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "Good, you're thorough. I like that." The rest of the executives left quietly, avoiding eye contact as though they'd just witnessed something sacred or shameful, they weren't sure which. Emma gathered her laptop and papers, feeling neither triumphant nor relieved. Just still, when she finally stepped out into the hallway, the office buzzed with the usual noise, phones ringing, keys clicking, small talk by the coffee machine. It was strange how normal everything looked. As if the morning hadn't just cracked open years of deception. By lunchtime, rumors had begun to spread. Whispers slipped between cubicles like drafts. "Did you hear? Clark got pulled into HR. Something about financial manipulation. Apparently Emma found it." She tried to keep her head down, but every pair of eyes that followed her made that impossible. That afternoon, Rivera called her into her office. The blinds were half drawn, casting striped shadows across the table. Rivera gestured for her to sit. "Emma," she began, "you did the right thing today. But I want to be clear, it won't be easy from here. There will be an investigation, interviews, paperwork. People will talk." Emma nodded. "I understand." Rivera studied her. "Most people wouldn't have had the courage. You didn't just protect this company. You reminded it what integrity looks like. I'll make sure that doesn't go unnoticed." "Thank you," Emma said softly. When she left the office, the air felt lighter. The knot in her stomach that had lived there for months, maybe years, had finally loosened. 2 days later, Clark's nameplate disappeared from his office door. Just like that. No farewell speech, no goodbyes. HR escorted him out quietly through a side exit. Emma didn't see it happen, but someone sent her a photo, his once pristine desk now bare except for a single abandoned coffee mug. That Friday, the department held an emergency meeting. Rivera herself addressed the team. As many of you know, Mr. Clark will no longer be with the company, she announced. We'll be restructuring leadership over the next few weeks. In the meantime, Emma Patel will be assuming coordination duties for the Seabrook account and overseeing departmental reporting. A ripple went through the room. Emma's throat tightened. She hadn't expected that, not yet. Rivera looked at her and said simply, "You've earned the trust." After the meeting, her co-workers stopped by one, some with congratulations, others with quiet apologies. "Should have spoken up about him years ago," Mark said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess we all got too used to being afraid." Emma smiled faintly. It's hard to speak when someone's trained you to stay silent. That night, as the office lights dimmed and the floor emptied, Emma stayed behind. She walked past Clark's old office, the glass still faintly smudged where his nameplate had been, and paused at the doorway. Inside, the space was hollow. For the first time, it didn't intimidate her. It was just a room. She stood there a moment longer, the city lights reflecting off the polished table, and thought of all the times she'd swallowed her words to survive. Now, those same silences had carried her here into a space she'd once been told she didn't belong, and for the first time, she felt she did. 3 weeks later, the office had a different rhythm. The air felt cleaner, somehow less fear, more focus. Conversations happened in open tones instead of whispers. Reports were submitted without the careful sugarcoating Clark had demanded. It was as if the entire department had exhaled after holding its breath for years. Emma's life, however, was still catching up. She hadn't realized how much space fear had taken up inside her until it was gone. Now, her mornings began with quiet confidence instead of quiet dread. She came to work early not out of anxiety, but because she wanted to. That Monday, she arrived to find a maintenance worker removing the frosted nameplate from Clark's old office door. In its place, he affixed a new one. Emma Patel, acting department head. She stood there for a moment, coffee in hand, watching the letters catch the morning light. "Congratulations," the worker said with a grin before walking away. She smiled back, but didn't move immediately. The door, once a symbol of distance and power, now opened with a soft click beneath her touch. Inside, everything was the same: the desk, the shelves, the faint smell of cedar polish, but it felt entirely different. The sunlight fell across the leather chair where Clark had once sat, booming and belittling. Now the room felt quiet, peaceful. She set her briefcase on the desk, ran her hand along its edge, and allowed herself a long, steady breath. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from Ms. Rivera. "Emma, the board has approved your promotion to department head. Congratulations, you've earned this, not just for exposing what was wrong, but for embodying what's right." For a moment, Emma simply stared at the screen. Then she smiled, a small, private smile, the kind that carried more strength than laughter ever could. Later that morning, she gathered her team for their first meeting under her leadership. People shuffled in hesitantly, still unsure how to act around their former peer turned boss. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was calm but firm. "I know the last few weeks have been intense. We've seen what happens when fear leads instead of trust. I want to build something different." The room was quiet. Everyone listened. "We'll run this department with transparency. If you make a mistake, own it. If you have an idea, speak it. I won't tolerate dishonesty, but I also won't tolerate silence when something needs to be said." For a moment she paused, looking around the table at faces that had once looked away when she was humiliated. "We all deserve better than that." Mark, sitting near the end, nodded slowly. "We do," he said softly. Something in the room shifted, then a fragile but real sense of respect. Not the forced, hierarchical kind Clark demanded, but the kind that was quietly earned. After the meeting, Emma returned to her office. The city stretched wide outside her window, towers and lights and stories overlapping in the distance. She thought of that day in the boardroom. The sting of Clark's words, "This is why juniors shouldn't touch big accounts." Now, she was the one signing off on every account. Her reflection in the glass looked steady, self-assured. She didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to gloat. Her silence no longer came from fear, it came from strength. She placed her coffee on the desk, opened her laptop, and began working. For the first time, the office didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like hers. Outside her door, someone hesitated before knocking. "Miss Patel?" a young intern asked nervously. "Do you have a minute to review my proposal?" Emma smiled. "Of course. Come in." The door closed behind the intern, and for a brief moment, Emma glanced at the nameplate again. The same silence that had once been used to shame her now commanded the room, and in that silence she built her empire.